The silver-laced air in the pit was thick enough to choke an alpha, but as the final lock clicked, it was my own breath that caught. My council had spent years telling me I was a queen of glass, beautiful, transparent, and easily shattered. But glass doesn't bleed. I stepped into the dark. The scent of wet earth and cold iron told me I wasn't alone. Kaelen didn't lunge. He didn't growl. He simply sat in the center of his cage, his shackled arms resting on his knees. His eyes weren't the glowing gold of a wolf. They were violet, the color of a dying star. "You've got the scent of a funeral on you, Elara," he whispered, the sound vibrating in my very marrow. "Is it yours or the kingdom's?" I knelt in the dirt, inches from his reach, and pressed my palm against the silver brand on his chest. It burned my skin, but I didn't pull away. "It's the council's," I replied, "because I'm not here to ask for your help, Kaelen. I'm here to give you the one thing they took from you, the name of the man who held the knife to your sister's throat." Kaelen's violet eyes narrowed. For a moment, the heavy silence was louder than the screams of the dying city above us. He leaned forward, the silver chains around his neck glowing a faint, angry blue. "You would betray your own council for a murderer?" he rasped. "They betrayed me first," I answered, my voice steady despite the heat radiating from his massive frame. "The Feral King's army is at the gates because the council opened them. They want me dead so they can put a puppet on my throne." Kaelen stood slowly. He was a giant of a man, and his chest mapped with scars from years of silver torture, each one a sentence someone else wrote on his body. Yet he moved with the grace of a predator who had never forgotten what he was. He looked at my small, pale hand, still pressed against his chest. "If I walk out of here, Elara, the first thing I'll do is tear the throats out of every man wearing a gold robe. I'll hand you the blade myself," I promised. "But first, you have to save the people they've abandoned." He stared at me for a long time, looking for a crack in the glass. He found none. He reached out, his thick fingers brushing my jawline. Not tender, not threatening. Something rarer than both. Certain. "The scent of death is gone," he murmured. "Now you smell like war." Above us, a massive explosion shook the dungeon walls. Dust rained from the ceiling in curtains, and the heavy iron doors at the top of the stairs were kicked open. The council's guards had arrived to finish what they started. "Kill the queen!" the lead guard shouted, leveling a silver-tipped crossbow at my heart. I didn't move. I looked at Kaelen. "The key is in the lock. Choose." Kaelen didn't hesitate. With a roar that shook the foundation stones of the palace, he ripped his right arm free from the wall, the iron bracket shattering like fired clay. He grabbed the key, twisted it into the lock of his neck collar, and stepped out of the shadows just as the first bolt was fired. He caught the silver arrow out of the air with his bare hand. The guards froze. They were looking at a ghost. A legend they had been told was broken. Kaelen moved with a terrifying economy of motion. No wasted gesture, no performance. He threw the silver bolt back with such force it pinned the lead guard through the shoulder to the stone door. He didn't kill him, he pinned him. A message, not a murder. The others he dismantled methodically, efficiently, like a man completing a task he had rehearsed in his mind for years of darkness. In seconds, the room was silent again, save for the ragged breathing of the living and the wet stillness of the floor. Kaelen stood at the center of it, chest heaving, violet eyes glowing with a light that had nothing animal in it. It was colder than that, more deliberate. He turned to me. "The first debt is paid. But we aren't safe yet. The Feral King's alpha is already in the throne room." Before I could respond, Kaelen grabbed my waist and pulled me behind a stone pillar. "I don't breathe," he hissed. A second later, a scent reached me. Not blood, not smoke. Something older. Rotten ceremonial wood and deep winter, the smell of a thing that had stopped caring what it destroyed. The Feral King was already downstairs. The Feral King walked into the dungeon, but he wasn't alone. Walking beside him, laughing low and easy, was my own captain of the guard. the man who had stood outside my bedroom door every night for 4 years, the man I had trusted with the sound of my sleeping. "Is the girl dead yet?" the feral king asked, his voice like sandpaper dragged across stone. "My men are inside now," my captain replied. "Once she's gone, the Silver Peak is yours, and I take my seat as governor." I felt Kaelen's muscles lock beside me. He was ready, but as I watched them, I noticed something that stilled my own breath more than the danger did. The captain reached up and pressed his thumb against a small cut on the feral king's jaw. A gesture with no strategy in it. Only habit, only intimacy. They weren't just allies. They were fated mates. My captain had sold our entire species, our children, our elderly, our wounded, because he had found his soul in the body of our greatest enemy, and no law on earth had ever been written that could compete with that. "They've bonded," I whispered to Kaelen. "This war was never about land or thrones. It's a blood bond pulling two men toward each other through whatever walls stood between them, including ours." Kaelen looked at me, something shifting behind his violet eyes. "A bond like that can't be broken by a sword, Elara. It can only be broken by the death of the heart. And even then, the one left living rarely survives it." For the first time, I didn't feel rage toward my captain. I felt something more complicated and more terrible. Understanding. The feral king stopped moving. He lifted his chin and began to scent the air in slow, deliberate pulls. Then he turned his head directly toward our pillar. "I smell glass," he whispered, "and I smell a dead man walking." "Run," Kaelen said. He didn't negotiate. He scooped me up and drove us toward a narrow ventilation shaft in the ceiling, his fingers finding the handholds in the dark, like he had memorized this dungeon from the inside out. Because he had. Years of darkness teach a man the architecture of his cage. Behind us, the ground cracked as the feral king shifted. The dungeon walls groaned under a weight they were never built to hold. We crawled through the narrow tunnels, the sound of claws against metal chasing us through every turn. We emerged onto the palace roof into cold mountain air that hit like open water. Below us, the city burned in uneven patches, some districts already ash, others still fighting. Kaelen set me down. He looked at the burning horizon, then back at me, and I saw him calculating. Not escape, but direction. We need the northern tribes. They're the only force that can face a bonded alpha pair in open battle. "They won't follow me," I said, looking at my burned palm. "To them, I'm an Omega who lost her nest before she ever built it." Kaelen stepped closer. His body heat hit me before his words did. "Then don't ask them as an Omega. And walk in as the woman who descended into a monster's pit and came back holding his leash." For the first time since I had opened that cell door, he wasn't looking at me with calculation or suspicion. He was looking at me the way you look at something you hadn't expected to be real. As we prepared to drop to the lower walls, a shadow crossed the moon above us. A great golden eagle circled in slow, patient loops, watching, marking, reporting. "The council's eyes," Kaelen cursed quietly. "They already know where we're going." 3 days through snow that had no interest in mercy. Kaelen refused to shift, staying human to conserve warmth between us. We moved by night and sheltered in rock caves by day, our bodies pressed together out of pure survival. His back against the cave wall, mine against his chest. His arms around me not with tenderness, but with the grim efficiency of a man keeping something alive that he had decided mattered. Each night, the silence between us changed texture. "Why did you really come for me, Elara?" he asked on the second night, his voice barely louder than the snow outside. "Because you're the only one who has never looked at me and seen a victim," I said. "Everyone else looks at me and sees what they can afford to lose." He was quiet for a long time. Then he turned me, slowly, until I had no choice but to look directly into those violet eyes in the dark. "I look at you and see a storm that hasn't broken yet," he said. The glass hasn't shattered because it's been waiting for the right moment to become a blade. He leaned forward, his breath warm against my lips. The cold outside pressing us together like a fist closing. For one suspended second I thought, a howl split the night. Then another, then 50. We stepped out of the cave into a circle of white wolves with ice-blue eyes, hundreds of them, breath rising in unison like smoke from a single fire. At their head stood a woman with a scar carved across her throat. Not a wound, a mark. Deliberate. Ancient. The woman shifted back into human form, wrapped in grey furs that matched the colour of her eyes. She looked at Kaelen the way you look at something you once tried to bury. You bring a murderer and a weakling onto sacred ground, she said. I bring a queen, Kaelen replied, his voice carrying across the ice without effort. The woman, Mara, Alpha of the North, laughed, but there was no warmth in it. A queen rules by what she carries inside her, not what sits on her head. If she wants the North, she walks the trial of the frozen heart, into the sacred spring, to the bottom. She retrieves the silver stone. She paused. If she is only what she appears to be, the water will stop her heart before she reaches it. Kaelen stepped forward. I stopped him with a hand on his arm. I looked at Mara. I'll do it. The sacred spring was black water ringed with teeth of ice, steam rising from its surface in thin, deceptive suggestions of warmth. I stripped my heavy cloak and stepped in. The cold was not like cold I had known before. It was a presence, a pressure, a thing with intent. It pushed through my skin and reached for something deeper, something it wanted to still. I went deeper, chest, throat. The world above the waterline became a grey suggestion. I went under. The cold reached my heart and squeezed. My vision fractured at the edges. The bottom was impossible to see. My body was making decisions without me, beginning to curl, beginning to give. And then, from somewhere beneath my sternum, not from the water, not from above, but from inside me, a light the colour of a gold coin in sunlight began to push back. I didn't drown. The water around me began to tremble, then to warm, then to boil outward from my skin in expanding rings. I felt the silver stone before I saw it. A pulse of recognition, like meeting something that had been waiting with the specific patience of an object that belongs to only one person. I touched it. It didn't move into my hand. It moved into my blood. A wave of heat detonated through my body, hotter and cleaner than anything I had language for, and I walked up out of the water and onto the bank completely dry, steam rising from my shoulders. The northern tribe dropped to their knees, not in ceremony, but in the involuntary collapse of people encountering something their bodies recognize before their minds do. Even Mara stepped back, and in the specific quality of her fear, I saw something that unlocked every locked room in my memory simultaneously. She wasn't afraid of what she was seeing. She was afraid of what it meant that she had failed. You knew, I said, and my voice had a new register in it, something beneath the words. The tea I drank every morning, it wasn't for my health. Mara said nothing. Her silence was a confession. You suppressed my power, I said. For years, on the council's orders, because I am a primal sun-wolf, and they knew what I would become if I ever found out. She didn't just know, Kaelen said, his voice dropping to something quiet and absolute. He had crossed the ground between himself and Mara without anyone seeing him move. She provided the potion. And my sister found the recipe. That is why she died. The ground beneath my feet began to glow faintly gold. From the tree line, the sound arrived before the shapes did, thousands of paws on frozen ground, a rhythm like a war drum made of living things. The feral king's army had tracked us through the eagle's eyes, and at their front, his face open with grief, already turning to fury, ran my captain. Take the lead, Elara, Kaelen said. He didn't hand me a sword. He stepped aside. The battle arrived like weather. all at once from every direction, with no interest in fairness. The feral wolves came in waves, and I met the first wave with something I had no name for yet, a light that originated in my chest and arrived at my hands already knowing what to do. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't a glow. It hit like a physical force and left scorch marks on the ice. I was aware of Kaelen at my back the entire time, not protecting me, fighting beside me, the way two people fight who have decided to trust each other's blind spots. His violet eyes burned in the dark. We moved in the same rhythm without having agreed to it. The feral king came through his own army like a stone through water, and Kaelen met him mid-field. They crashed together with a sound that silenced everyone within 100 yards. Black fur and brown. Could two alphas settling a debt the world had been owed for years? My captain found me at the edge of the fighting. His face was wrecked. Not with rage, but with the particular anguish of a man who had made a choice he believed in and was only now understanding what it had cost everyone else. You chose a monster over your people, I said. I chose the only real thing I have ever felt, he said. You've never felt it. You don't get to name it. I looked at him for a long moment. No, I don't. I lowered my hand. But I can't let you burn my city for it. His expression broke open, and in that one unguarded second, I saw that he knew it too. He dropped to one knee in the snow. Not surrender. Something older than surrender. He was asking me to end it cleanly, before I could decide. So a sound I had never heard from a living thing tore across the battlefield. Not a roar, not a howl. A wet, final silence. I turned to find the feral king's jaws locked at Kaelen's throat, both of them motionless, both of them bleeding, neither of them letting go. I didn't scream. The light inside me didn't surge with panic. It went very still, the way a flame goes still in a sealed room, not weaker, but concentrated down to its essential point. I crossed the battlefield in the space between one breath and the next. I didn't reach for the feral king's throat or his chest. I placed my hand on his temple, the way you might touch something you were trying to understand. Let him go, I said quietly, and I'll make it fast. He didn't let go. The white light came from everywhere under my skin at once. It wasn't violent. It was complete. The feral king simply ceased, a thing that had burned too long finally running out of fuel. As he died, the bond snapped. Across the field, my captain made a sound that had no word in any language I knew. He was on his feet, and then he wasn't. His heart had kept itself alive for one person, and that person was gone, and the heart saw no reason to continue. He was dead before he reached the ground, his face wearing the only expression that had ever been entirely his own. I knelt beside Kaelen. His throat was torn, but his eyes were open. Violet steady, fixed on my face with an expression I would spend a long time learning to read. I pressed my glowing hand to his wound and held it there. The skin rebuilt itself slowly, leaving a single clean scar, thin as a sentence. He looked up at me. I told you, he said. His voice rough and certain. Glass doesn't bleed. No, I said, taking his hand and rising, turning to face the field of kneeling wolves, the northern tribes, my loyalists, the living and the witnessed. It cuts. We returned to the Silver Peak. The council had fled in the night, taking nothing but their guilt and leaving everything else for me to rebuild. I sat on my throne with the permanent gold fire in my eyes and Kaelen standing at my right. Not behind me, not below me, beside me, where the view of everything we had both survived was exactly the same. I looked out over my people. The world had built a story about me from the outside, fragile, transparent, breakable. They had told that story so many times they had started to believe it was mine. It wasn't. Glass doesn't bleed, it cuts. That is how a queen of glass becomes a queen of fire. If this story held you from the first lock, clicking to the last scar closing, subscribe Share it with someone who needs a queen today, and come back for the next one. We are just getting started.